Coming up, a conversation with Tom Strand, candidate for Colorado Springs mayor.
This is 6035 Media.
Casting an informed vote is your right and your duty as a citizen. I'm Bryan Grossman, executive editor at 6035.
And I'm Shelly, Roehrs, spokesperson for the League of Women Voters at the Pikes Peak Region.
We're teaming up to bring you conversations with the candidates in the April 2023 Colorado Springs city election. So this interview is both an episode of the new 6035 Vote podcast
and the League's Making Democracy Work podcast. So let's get to it. So Tom, why don't you give us, thank you for being here today. Why don't you give our listeners, if you've people who have never been here or new to the area or don't know anything about you, tell us a little bit about yourself.
I'll try and give you the elevator speech. Tom Strand got here in the 70s at Pete Field. Had a 30-year career as a JAG in the Air Force. I was a lawyer in the Air Force, starting at Peterson Air Force Base, and then went around the world. Came back here in 2004 and retired and got involved with District 11 School Board. And I was elected to the District 11 School Board and served about 5 years, one appointment and one 4-year term. And I was the president of the District 11 School Board when it was the largest district on the Front Range. In 2015, I ran for city council because I really thought that the relationship between the executive and legislative branches could be improved. And the big thing back then was a collaborative relationship with the mayor and the 9 city council members. And at that time, Mayor Suthers was elected to his first term. And then I was reelected in 2019. I'm an at-large city council member covering the 200 square miles of Colorado Springs. I live in Old Colorado City, which is the 3rd district. I think that's pretty close to where we are here. And so I was reelected in 2019. I have served on all 4 leadership positions in the Board of Directors for Utilities. I was the vice chair and the chair in 2015 and 2017 of Utilities, and we're now selecting a new CEO for Utilities that we're going to pick, I think, in about 2 weeks. I then became the pro tem at City Council in 2019, and I'm now the president of the City Council going forward, finishing up my 8 years, and so I'll be term limited in April.
Thank you.
It was a good elevator's pitch. Yep.
Tell you a little bit about
it. It does, yes, sir.
That was perfect. So, Tom, I'll get you your first specific question. This is development and water related. What's your stand on the 120? And you were involved with this as a city councilor.
I am.
What's your stand on the 128% water rule and for extending water and other utilities to flagpole annex developments?
Okay, 2 separate questions. I really think what we ought to do with the water ordinance is delay it. I voted for the 128 because we couldn't get 120 or 125. I think that even our experts at CSU, and I have the highest respect for our water experts that work this issue, I think they're being very conservative, with the amount of water that we need in terms of surplus. A lot of us thought in 2015 and 16 when we opened up the Southern Delivery System that it would provide all the water we needed forever. What it provides is access. It doesn't provide the water. And I think we need a study, an in-depth study, and maybe with a consultant, outside of the CSU experts. And so this is going to come to council on the 14th, which is next Tuesday. And I am going to hope that we can delay any further action on a water ordinance until September, when we will have 4 new council members and a new mayor. And so that's my hope on that. In terms of annexations, flagpole annexations sort of have a nasty term because they're not close by. This particular one, Amara, is much closer to the area that involves Fountain than it does to us. It's just close to a couple of our highways, and that's the flagpole piece. What I'm interested in, Bryan, is providing housing. And I think this project and some other ones can provide housing that we desperately need. Hopefully it will be affordable. If it's not affordable, it will provide houses when people kind of move up to this level. And so I think we need annexations and more property other than, just the areas that we've got within our city at this time.
Okay. Thank you, Tom.
Yep.
Shelly?
Another kind of question regarding water. It's a big one, and it's also two-pronged.
Yep.
We waste a lot of water with regards to about 78% of our water usage is for landscaping, right?
Yes.
Curb appeal. And as a realtor, I get curb appeal. I get it. But I do not get, resorts wasting water, and it just runs for hours and hours, and it takes hours and hours to fix a maintenance problem that, I'm talking about one on the west side that I know of in particular. And then our golf courses, right, take a lot of water. And, Kentucky bluegrass, if I've got a neighbor who plants Kentucky bluegrass because it looks good and it's beautiful, it's a lot of water. Now, they're paying for that water. I get that. But how can we be a little bit smarter and do better guidelines with regards to that water usage? And then should the city consider extending water? And this is based on being a regional water provider. We've got some areas that are not necessarily in the city, that are located outside the city that might never even be annexed. But they, what does that look like for us as being a regional water provider in that instance?
Shelly, we in 2017 did a long-term study on water. We studied this when I was chair of the Utilities Board. And at that time, that study, which we did, that plan, which is now coming up on 6 years old, showed that we had enough water going forward for decades and that we were in great shape. I think that study probably was a little flawed and needs to be redone, but clearly water is our most important resource here. Our utilities is a for-service resource, and for a municipally owned utility, having gas, electric, wastewater, and water is very unusual. And we've been very successful with it. I think we have to be guardians of this water. I appreciate your comment about Kentucky bluegrass. It is not the kind of grass or vegetation that really is suited to this area. We've got other grasses, and up at the utility center up on the mesa, they have a center up there that you can
beautiful.
go and
I live just a couple blocks away. I
love
going there.
Well, it's a terrific place for all of our citizens to go up there.
You get free things there, by the way, just for an FYI. They give you a free low flow shower head.
Yeah.
So it's pretty awesome.
And they've got different, examples of what we can do with indigenous grasses and vegetation for the outside. And you're absolutely right. Once we get into April through September, that's when most people spend most of their money in utilities is on their water bill, especially if they're watering. We do have limitations. 3 times a week you can water, but I think people abuse that. We have, with the population growing to almost 500,000 people in, say the last 10 years, we've got a situation where we've really done well with our conservation of water. Whether it's special toilets that don't use much water, or showers that use less water, or bathtubs that use less water, or hot tubs that use less water. I think we've done a terrific job with that. But it is something that we constantly have to be on guard for. And as the board of directors for utilities, I used to spend probably a third of my time on water issues, both water and wastewater issues. So I think it's something we have to be very sensitive to. I think this ordinance that we talked about earlier, water ordinance, was really in lieu of at least a project or a proposal that we'd put a ballot issue on the ballot for people to vote on. I think if we did have a ballot issue about water, I think most people would vote in favor of it because it's sort of they're here now and they want to protect their future and their children's future here, as opposed to new people moving into the area that they don't feel that much loyalty to. So I'm glad that this is not going to a ballot. I think the mayor got very involved with that, and that's why the ordinance has come before both the Board of Directors for Utilities and now City Council.
Okay. So the specific in question 2017 plan, did your study recognize the increase in our population growth?
It did.
At that time? So it recognized that you were going to be growing at a certain rate?
It did.
Okay. And just a question from the League of Women Voters to not put something on the ballot, that's a whole other conversation for another day. So
okay.
We'll just get back to that. But
fine.
Yeah, I'm good. Thanks.
Okay.
Fine.
Water, though, is kind of our gold. And we have to treat it that way. And everything that we use it for, we have to consider conservation.
Thank you, sir.
Yep.
So moving away from water,
okay.
Where do you stand on accessory dwelling units being allowed in single-family residential areas?
I voted for accessory dwelling units, when it came up because, again, I think it provides, housing that's desperately needed. From my perspective, it was sort of the mother-in-law suite kind of concept, where you'd have a family member that would be in the accessory dwelling unit. We did put limitations on how many we could have in a particular area. But I think they're necessary, and I think for infill in our community, and I live in Old Colorado City, which is, got lots of houses in there, and they're pretty close together. I'm in favor of those, and I think as long as they are managed properly through our city clerk's office, that we need to continue them.
You mentioned the mother-in-law sort of scenario. You're also okay with commercial use for those sorts of accessory dwelling units?
I am.
Yeah,
I am.
Okay, thanks. Easy enough. Shelly?
Yeah.
Yes, sir. So also along the lines of housing, right? We have affordable housing attainability issue, right? It's not just about being a crisis. It's just not attainable. And again, as a realtor, I see that every day.
Yeah.
We got townhouses that are $290,000. That's a lot of money for 25-year-old people who want to own a home, or even 50-year-old people who want to own a home in some instances. So how can the city address, or what can the city do to address that affordable housing? Because you just said a few minutes ago, whether or not some of them are going to be affordable housing or not, that's not solving our problem.
No, it's not. And I think Mayor Southers has done a good job in having a 2,000 unit kind of goal, that he wants 2,000 units annually of affordable housing, that Steve Posey, who works for the city, has been working on and getting federal grants and aid that we get for these. I think we've got to continue. I'm on the regional building department as their chair. And so I work with, not only the regional building department, but HBA, Housing and Building Association. We have got to come up with more ways to incentivize housing that is affordable. And since we've gone to attainable, I think it's kind of a mixed use of words, because the difference between attain and affordable is confusing to me. Most young people, and even some seniors that are making less than $40,000 a year, and even if you have two people in a household making that amount, they cannot afford a single-family home. They might be able to afford a duplex that you mentioned, but I think this is after public safety, and I know we'll talk about public safety because that's my prime area that my candidacy is about this time. Affordable housing is right up there with what we have to do to incentivize builders and developers. Maybe we have to go back and look at tiny homes again, that we had some conversation about tiny homes. Having a 3,000, 4,000 square foot home to me is excessive. I live in a 2,100 square foot home in Old Colorado City that I bought for less than $300,000 in 2005. I've just added an addition to it and done some remodeling and some new bathrooms and spent $300,000 on that, in terms of the remodeling. So I'm very sensitive to the cost for plumbing, electric, and framing and everything we have to do. But to me, the mayor's got to be every day wake up and think about affordable housing for our people. Not attainable, affordable.
Thank you.
Yep.
You're going to love this because this is a public safety question.
Great.
Yeah, right. Police ranks we've seen figures, 50 to 70 officers below authorized strength. Crime's on the rise. Traffic crashes are on the rise. What do you propose we do about public safety?
Public safety, is my number one goal in terms of running for mayor. I want to make Colorado Springs the safest city in America. Mm-hmm. It is not. It currently, last year in 2022, we had roughly between 54 and 57 homicides. Mm-hmm. When I got here in the 70s at Pete Field, before Space Command was here, 10 homicides was considered alarming. Mm. And now we're 5 times that number.
Also probably 5 times the population, but...
It may be 3 times the population, but I think that's a bad kind of analysis to say, well, we have more people, so we have more bad people. A lot of these are domestic relations issues that go on. We, on our highways here, had 54 deaths on our highways, both pedestrian and traffic deaths. Here's what we got to do. We currently, and the numbers change on a week-to-week, month-to-month basis, but with sworn police officers, we've got about 750 sworn police officers. We need today 850. The mayor has worked that very hard, but the problem is we've got to start in middle school and high school and work with parents to encourage them to want their daughters and sons to become police officers, because that's not the case today. After the Memphis situation that we've seen, and they just keep popping up, the parents and grandparents are just blinking their eyes and saying, go into IT, Tom, go into, the media, but don't be a police officer. We've got to encourage in our middle and high schools that this is a profession that is honorable and it is necessary. We currently have an ongoing police academy that is going on. We bring in, maybe 60 police officers into that academy, and by the time we graduate them, we're down to the low 40s that people have found out this is not for them. I think we've got to go out and we've got to recruit police officers from other cities. I mean, we're a beautiful place here. We can bring in people from lots of other cities that I think, would love to come here who are already trained. I would love to set up, with one of our colleges and universities, a police college, not an academy, so that it'd be a 2-year program that they would go through, get an associate's degree. I go to every single retirement and promotion at CSPD and CSFD. You can ask all the other candidates if they do that. I've done that for 8 years. I'm on my 3rd police chief and my 3rd fire chief. I know them all. I know all the commanders. It is my number one goal is to make people, when they go into, say, parking garages. A lot of women that go into parking garages feel, especially at night, they feel a little vulnerable. People going into ATMs feel vulnerable. People walking their dogs at night feel vulnerable. We've got to change that. And we've got to go back to the program that we had where we've got Neighborhood Watch and really strengthen that Neighborhood Watch program. So it's my number one priority is public safety. And I will work that every day.
Do you see the city playing a role in that outreach to middle schools and high schools?
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah, I mentioned earlier, being involved with District 11. When I was with District 11, it had 32,000 students. They're now down to about 26,000 students. But it's all of the districts, and holding hands with them, not dictating to them from city government, but working with them, so that we can help, I think, steer many of the students. And, in another area, we're doing that in construction. When I was on District 11, I talked to parents about their children becoming electricians and plumbers, and they'd say, well, Tom, my son's going to be a doctor and an engineer and an IT specialist. I don't want him to be in the trades. That's changed. From 2006 and 2007, that's changed. We have to do the same with public safety, both for police, fire, and with emergency management. We now have a combined office of emergency management with the city and the county. So those 3 areas are ones that I spend a lot of time on now, and I'll spend more time as a mayor.
Okay, thanks. Shelley?
Yes, sir. As a neighborhood watch captain myself, one of the very first things I probably did was kind of take over for the neighborhood watch person, because it got me to know my neighbors. And I'm not originally from here. We moved here because you're right. It was beautiful. And I guess a couple things with regards.
You're not from Cleveland originally, are you?
No, Central Illinois.
Okay.
Midwesterner via South Carolina, and then I met my husband in the military. So we had the opportunity to be able to move and afford and come to this place. But also I am the child of a police officer in very, very small town, USA, and also a volunteer firefighter.
Wow.
So I see a lot of that part of it. But one thing you did mention, I'm going to invite you to the League's event coming up next month. Domestic violence is one of those hard calls that police officers get that put them in a very precarious situation in many, many instances.
Right.
So when we talk about, me walking downtown and feeling vulnerable, that's not it. It's the situation where you put yourself in where you can hear somebody yelling at somebody else next door, and there's a problem that we have, and that's a whole nother conversation. But I'm going to invite you to the League is having one of our community conversations next month.
Great.
We're trying to get the El Paso County Sheriff. We've we would love to have you on that panel to discuss it, just to say, this is a problem, and we probably should be. The police need some assistance.
And Shelly, I got to and I'll do this real quickly. Since I've been on city council, I've had a constituent threaten me because I told him not to use vulgar and foul language in chambers. And he has sent me multiple letters threatening me. So I went to file, as a male, a protection order against this individual. I was lined up with about maybe a half dozen to 10 females who were already battered. That process does not take care of victims. It took me 6 months to get a permanent protection order, and I'm a lawyer. And I know how to fill out the paperwork, and I know how to go in front of the magistrates and argue. The people that I saw that give up doing that are the women that are beaten and battered because they don't feel they have any choice. And going through that process is grueling. And so whatever happens with this mayoral election, they're going to kick me out of the city hall no matter what because of the 8 years. I want to get involved with domestic relations issues. We need to have more social workers, with our police officers, and I can talk about that when we get to your event.
That'd be great. Thank you, sir. So my question is, the police also deal with another issue that they really don't have a lot of expertise in, and it's our homeless issue. A lot of calls that they deal with and go on, it's just part of the process. So how do you address, how can we do better with regards to our homeless issues? Because it's multi-pronged.
Every February we do this point-in-time count. And when I came on in 2015, we did the point-in-time count that year, and we had roughly 1,800 to 2,000 homeless. Last year's point-in-time count, we had 1,400 homeless. I don't believe that point-in count. You drive around this city and you look under the bridges and you look near the waterways where we've got an ordinance that they can't camp near ordinance. And our HOT team, our homeless outreach team, and we've got 2 of them with the police. We don't have enough of them. And we have a huge problem with our homeless population. There are 3 groups in there that I want to focus on. One are families, either single moms or single dads with children. We need to take care of them. And we need to, the Marion House works with them and really tries. The second group, are males primarily, and they either have behavior and mental health problems and or substance abuse problems with either alcohol or drugs. I know we can help that group too, but we've got to get to them and we've got to wrap around services. Our Mount Carmel works with veterans, that are in that category. There is a third group of people, mostly young males, that just don't want any control over their lives. They want to live free, and many of them are criminals. And I think we have to have a more focused effort on these people who are stealing, who are beating each other up, who are killing other homeless people, and we've got to focus our attention on that with our HOT team. So it's another area that I'm very involved with. We're now on our second person that is in charge of sort of the city homeless operation. That person does not work directly for the mayor, and they should. They should work directly for the mayor, not the chief of staff, or not, one of the other directors. So that's how I would change that. And I would have more than just a February count. Working with Springs Rescue Mission, I'm on their board. And, that's an area that, obviously deals with homeless that want to get out, from under that burden.
Thank you.
Yep.
Appreciate it, Bryan.
Running up on our time limit, so probably just a couple more questions. Tom, if you are elected mayor, do you foresee having to ask voters for any fee or tax increases?
I don't.
New fees or tax increases?
I don't. And people say, well, how are you going to come up with this money for more,
more
police?
Yeah.
And we need more firefighters, too. About 80% of all the firefighter calls are not for structural fires. They're for health issues, heart attacks that Tom has had. I know we can work a lot harder in grants in police and fire, both in state and federal. We've got grant writers in there, but we can do better with that. I think we can work a public-private partnership in our community so that we have, businesses, and we've just brought in 2 or 3 huge businesses through the chamber. So I think we can have public-private partnerships for money. And here's where I think we can also get funding. When I came on council, the general budget in 2015 was about $280 million a year. In 2023, it's $420 million a year. Back in 15, we had a 14% reserve, 14% of that 280. Today we have a 20% reserve, and God bless
of the 400
of the 420.
Right.
And God bless the mayor for doing that in case we need it for a recession or something. I want to take money out of that account because we need it today, not tomorrow. I'm less worried about tomorrow than I am today, and I think we can pull $2 to $3 million out of that account every single year, at least the 4 years if I get elected mayor, I will do that, and take it down to 14 or 15% reserve, but take care of our public safety and our people today.
Okay. What about infrastructure?
That was 2C and 2C2, were huge issues, and our stormwater issue was a huge issue that we had to do. Hats off to Mayor Suthers and his team for doing that, but I was a big fan of 2C. Our roads, our curbs and gutters, we're putting about $50 to $60 million a year through 2C, that extra sales tax. The mayor backed that off a little bit for 2C2. I'm not sure I would have. People were kind of used to paying that sales tax. We've done terrific in that. What we haven't done terrific is sidewalks. If you go around some of the old parts of our community, Old Colorado City, the old North End, sidewalks are terrible. You've got people in wheelchairs and walkers in the street because we haven't fixed those sidewalks. But the infrastructure is something you can't let go, and you can't take off your video screen or your attention. And so it's extremely important, but not as important as public safety.
Okay. All right. Shelly?
Speaking of sidewalks, I've got one that has been in my neighborhood that's been on the list to be fixed over 3 years now, and literally my neighbors were told, well, if you pay for it, we can.
We'll do it. And they'll even partner with you if you pay 50% of it.
And that's not good for those that are not economically able to do it. So just a little
agree.
bit of biasness with regards to literally your city policy right now.
We've got trees that are waiting 3 and 4 years in order to be trimmed so that they don't fall during a windstorm.
Right. We're 3 years behind. So I have 2 questions.
Okay.
These are league questions, kind of, I guess. They deal with things that we deal with. One is something that you deal with. But specifically, what are your thoughts on raising city council pay to a reasonable amount that's inclusive of others who don't have the ability to do this as their only job, like a retiree? That's our first question. And then what are your thoughts on moving spring municipal elections to the fall? That would mainly help increase voter turnout during those possibly, fall school elections, and save the city $600,000 a year.
First of all, I want to deal with the issue about council pay, $6,250 a year. We have a budget too in terms of our expenses that's now up to $4,000 a year for lunches, dinners, travel, going to Washington with the chamber, things of that nature. I haven't been able to use that this year because as president of council, I just can't leave town very often. But I know that Mr. Helms, who's the president pro tem now, Randy Helms, is going to work really hard on pay for council members. And there's been a couple of times it's been on the ballot, and it has failed miserably. Like 80% of the people vote against it because they say, hey, if I can get Tom to work for $6,000, why should I pay him any more? Most council members put in at least 40 hours a week. If you compare us with the county commissioners, it's almost laughable, in terms of the compensation. I think it's critical to get people in their 30s and 40s, involved with city council. When I ran in 2019, there were a number of younger people that ran, but I don't think it attracted the right younger people. So I'm totally in favor of that. I think we have to change that. I would start at about a $50,000 amount for council members. I think that's a good area to kind of start at and go forward. In terms of the election period, there's a lot to be said about April elections in settling it. I'm still fatigued from the last November election that we had, where everybody either at the federal or state level, got so involved. You saw all of these commercials, one after the other, that were coming on television about different candidates. And so I'm reluctant to want to jump into a November election because it takes the focus off the city, and we're blended then with the state and the federal. level, and I think that could be problematic.
That's why I mentioned the fall school elections. You're not blended. It's an off-election year.
Shelly, I would be willing to take a look at that, and I've read studies about it, that the number of people, we roughly have 320,000 registered voters in our 200 square miles. About half of those will participate in this April election, maybe.
That's a good positive aspect. But then it could also save the city $600,000 a year.
I think it's worth looking at. Kind of like ranked choice voting is probably an issue that's worth looking at, so that you don't have runoffs.
I hope you're still looking at that after the last District 3 that we talked about. But yeah, all good. Thank you, sir. Appreciate your time.
You're welcome. Are we
Tom,
done?
we're just about out of time. You want to take about 2 minutes and wrap things up? Let us know why we should vote for you.
Yeah, I'll take the last part. Roughly, at least I get this from the city clerk. The average age in Colorado Springs now is 34 years of age, which is kind of incredible because all of my friends are a lot older than that. And a lot of my friends who moved here are kind of disgusted with the fact that they think we've let our building and development get out of whack. We haven't controlled it and managed it the way we should. As you go out on, whether it's on any of the roads that are going east, it looks like, rooftops everywhere. So I think we have to have controlled development, but we've got to look at all elements of our community. The youth, the kids in school, what we can do to help them with more programs. I'm a real big fan of the HBA program for construction that I mentioned earlier. Mm-hmm. I also think there are other areas, and I'd like to get them into public safety, whether it's fire or police. I think we have to look at our seniors. We're building a new senior center, which is terrific. And we've got a lot of seniors that I feel that are neglected and left out. And so I think we need to reach out to them and have a stronger, program with them. And finally, it's families. People need to come here and they need to be able to feel they can use our parks. We haven't talked about that. And open spaces. TOPS is coming on the ballot in November. Mm-hmm. I mean, in November, in April. It's the only ballot issue that we've got other than candidates. Mm-hmm. And it keeps it at 0.1%. So 1 cent on a dollar will go for open space, 75% for open space, and then parks in terms of maintenance. And we've got 15 parks we've promised people on the eastern and northern parts of town that we haven't built. So we've got to take care of families and provide them with places to take their children on the many beautiful days that we have. So there's a lot to be done in this new campaign. I think it's pretty exciting. When you do have a mayor that's term limited, it kind of opens the floodgates. And now we've got 12 candidates that have said that they think they can do things a little bit better or differently. Mm-hmm. So, and I feel the same way. I think because I've been deeply involved with both utilities and city government now for 8 years, my spin-up time is going to be minimal. Mm-hmm. I know all of the directors personally, and I walk back and forth between the city administration building and City Hall every day, and I think I'm the guy to do it.
All right. Thank you, Tom. We appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
You've been watching or listening to a joint podcast effort by 6035 Media and the League of Women Voters of the Pikes Peak Region.
Be sure to follow Making Democracy Work and check out lwvppr.org for more information regarding our candidate forums in March.
And check in with 6035 Vote to make sure your vote is an informed one. This podcast is produced by Dave Gardner, video directed by Nick Raven. I'm Bryan Grossman, executive editor.
And I'm Shelly Roehrs, spokesperson for the League of Women Voters of the Pikes Peak Region. See you next time.
Hi, I'm Dave Gardner.
And I'm Nick Raven.
We're the podcast producers here at 6035 Media.
6035 Vote is just one of a growing family of hyperlocal podcasts that we're creating.
And these are for you, someone who wants to engage fully in your community.
We've got the 6035, which is a quick, lively recap of the top news stories of the week.
It's my favorite. It's really great and often funny.
I love having you as a guest, actually.
I do too.
And then we have Hot Takes and Streaming Breaks, which is a potpourri of news and commentary about movies, gaming, TV streaming, and just so much more. It's for the youthful at heart, and that could be anyone, really.
Yeah, I'm surprised I even really enjoy it because Nick hosts that, and he's witty.
Well, and the cool thing is that you can watch both of these podcasts on YouTube.
Or you can listen to them on the go in your favorite podcast app.
And there's a couple more, but you can also visit 6035media.org/podcast to see them, browse them, sample them.
And then subscribe to the ones that you like.
And then subscribe to this YouTube channel.
Yeah. And if you really love it all, like we do, you can just subscribe to the 6035 Podcast Network podcast, which is a conglomeration of all the episodes, all the brilliance and humor that emanates from the studio.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of it. So like and subscribe today and go listen to them all or watch them.
What he said. Good. Thanks.
Got it?
That wasn't so painful.